Hello and welcome to Adoption Pop. We're a podcast journalist,
a filmmaker,
and a cultural critic burst pop culture's favorite adoption tropes.
Because we're adopted.
Haley, you recently visited New York City for the very first time. What was your favorite part?
Is it too predictable to say all the time I was hanging out with my friends? But okay, I'm going to give a New York moment though. I was actually solo and I got to go visit the New York Public Library branch in Bryant Park. And I totally geeked out in the gift shop. My favorite purchases were some New York Public Library pins, which maybe I should have worn today. If it's a pin day, I didn't know. And I forgot that today's movie has an iconic scene shot in those hailed halls until the rewatch.
Well, there is no definitive source for the number of movies and television shows filmed in New York City, but according to the City Council, more than 2,500 shoot permits were approved in 2020 alone. There are films set or shot in New York, and there are films that live, breathe, and drink in all of its cosmopolitan energy. I am, of course, talking about Sex and the City, the HBO network show airing for 6 seasons from 1998 to 2004 before making the leap to the big screen in 2008. The feature film picked up where the show left off, with Samantha living with her celebrity boy toy on the West Coast, Miranda living in something less than domestic bliss in Brooklyn, Carrie finally settling down with Big, and Charlotte making her dreams of motherhood complete with her Chinese adopted daughter Lily. The film was the highest grossing rom-com of 2008 and set records for biggest opening weekend for an R-rated comedy, a romantic comedy, and for a film featuring an all-female leading cast. Not as good as this podcast featuring an all-female leading cast, of course, but I couldn't help but wonder, do all women love Sex in the City?
Well,
Kristal takes a sip of her Cosmopolitan for the listeners.
AKA
Mocktail.
non-alcoholic Olay.
Ooh,
Okay.
I love those.
I like them too. Okay, to answer your question, Sullivan, I think it would be safe to say most women would love Sex and the City, the TV show. I would say many people, including me, would hate Sex and the City, the movie. It's a shit movie.
Why don't you let us know how you really feel? But Kristal, but you should be honest. This is a place to be honest.
I know. I was really holding back, you guys. I don't know if it's I'm a mother now or my worldview has changed and opened up since the last time I watched this. But who the heck was the director of this thing? This had to be a whole entire male directorial producer shot group, because I thought no way a woman would actually allow this garbage to go out into the world. That's all I have to say about that.
Can we go back in time just for a little bit to sweet baby Haley, who was still full on in evangelical Christianity at the time. And I went to see this movie in the theater with one of my friends from church.
Wow.
And the fact that there was so much sex and
beyond.
And beyond. I was scandalized, but I loved it at that time.
Yeah, like I think I loved this movie at the time, but now I look at it and I think, my goodness, Big. I used to love Big. I loved him. And now if my daughters ever dated a man like Big, I'd be like, get the F out of here. Like, get out of here. This guy, the way he like, you can't get out of the car because she doesn't pick up the phone. Give me a break.
Wait, and then he can't get out of the car because she doesn't turn to look at him.
Oh my! It was like a very, very bad soap opera. Like, I would rather watch Young and the Restless before I watch this. No, that's not true. That's not true.
Okay. Well, I also have a lot of memories of Sex in the City, but I think the only one that I will share is I graduated from law school when the series was on. So before the movie, but during the series. And as I was preparing for today's episode, and particularly for our recording right now, I remembered the fact that to my law school graduation, underneath my cap and gown, I wore a black turtleneck and a gray pleated mini skirt and stilettos and a big pink flower on my neck. So I don't know that any photographs survive because this was before digital photography, or at least ubiquitous digital photography, but you would have seen a large pink flower on my neck. It was not this flower, but I was wearing a different large pink flower, and I was just as fashionable then as I am right at this moment. Of course, we're talking solely about the film today, but I do know, Haley, you went back and rewatched the last episode of the series. So for folks who have not seen this in a while, the opening credits of the film recaps where we left off in the series because the film picks up where we left off. So can you like level set for us, like where are we, and specifically where are we as it relates to the making of Charlotte's family as the movie opens?
Yes, and that's really what I focused in on the finale episode because I couldn't watch Paris and I couldn't do it. So at the beginning of this movie, Carrie is with Big, Miranda's happily married, and as you said, Samantha's off in California. But when we do the flashback to Charlotte, York, Goldenblatt, and Harry, in the finale episode, we see two different adoption scenarios with them. So the first is they have a couple in their apartment in New York, and they're having brunch with them. And it's a white couple, and they seem Midwestern and also come across as not very intelligent. And they are the birth parents to a baby girl. And Charlotte and Harry are hoping to adopt their baby. And the couple tells them, actually, we changed our minds. We want to keep her. And Harry's like, why are you even here? And they're like, well, we've never been to New York. So framing this couple as charlatans, essentially, and that they have scammed Harry and Charlotte out of the money to pay for their trip to New York. And they're not going to give them their daughter. And so Charlotte says to Harry, like, we knew something like this could happen. You know, the agency told us, or our lawyer told us. And then at the very end, the happy moment is, and this is what they replay for us in the film. Harry says, they're giving us a baby. He shows Charlotte a photo of a little Chinese girl, and she cries and says, that's our baby. So that's the little right before we start the movie.
And so we start the movie, and this is now a couple of years beyond the end of the series. They sort of kept it roughly, the timeline went on. So Lily is now, I mean, how old is Lily in this movie? Do you think? Is she 4-ish? 4 or 5?
Yeah.
I think for me, maybe the most striking thing about that, two things that I noticed about Lily, and we'll say the first half of the movie, roughly the first half of the movie, is wherever the four women appear, Lily is there. She is in a whole lot of this movie. She's there, like at brunch, at houses, happy hour. Lily is there. And if you happen to multitask while you're watching this movie and you're not actually watching the screen, you would miss her because she doesn't make a sound.
She's a perfect child.
She's
such a good little girl.
Don't you mean she's a perfect accessory, Kristal? She's like a really expensive purse that is just, taking up that seat because you don't want to put it on the floor at brunch.
Absolute silence.
My mom would constantly talk about what a good little girl I was, that I would just sit so quietly and I wouldn't talk, and people would go on and on and on about how well behaved I was. And that sets a really unrealistic precedence for your own children. Because then when your own children actually have a voice because you're teaching them to have one and they behave like children, you're like, what the heck is wrong with this kid? I was never like that. I was quiet.
Yeah, that resonates with me also, Kristal, like the being praised for silence. Mm-hmm. Like one thing I distinctly remember, I suffered quite a horrific burn on my hand when I was about 4. Mm. And I had to go to the emergency room, and there were multiple trips back and forth to the doctor to care for this horrible burn on my hand. And the way my mother would tell the story when I was older is, you were so good, you never made a sound, which is like, but Lily's perfect. Lily is perfect. She's perfectly silent. We should also talk a minute about her name. I feel like Lily is a Lily White name. Right? I mean,
what do you mean?
Well,
I'm
lilies
not
are
picking
white.
Up what you're throwing down.
Like lilies are white. Like lilies are white. They're virginal, and it's a Chinese child, and we'll name her White. Literally name the child White.
Wow, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Wow. I was every time she came into the scene, I was looking really intently at her surroundings to see if they had any cultural representation around her, like pictures on the wall or little knickknacks on her shelf or anything like that. I didn't see anything. The one thing I did see was that when Charlotte tucked her into bed, she had a doll that was beside her that had dark hair and maybe similar skin tone. So I felt a little bit of okay, at least you didn't tuck her in with a blonde-haired Barbie or something like that. That felt a little bit better. And I did see an American Doll in the background as well.
Yeah, I did the same thing, Kristal.
Did you?
Yeah, I was had my eye out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we had to scan for any themes of adoption through this movie because it's pretty scant. There's another child in this movie that's around the same age as Lily, and Brady's mother doesn't bring him everywhere.
Correct.
No.
Correct.
But Brady's with Magda.
Well, it's true. Charlotte really wanted to be a mom, and she was going to be a hands-on mom. Maybe.
Okay, I'm going to say one thing maybe in defense, but just so nobody gets concerned. When we talk about the second half of the movie, I'm going to turn around and undo everything I'm about to say. So,
okay,
which is, Brady's a boy. This is girl time. Sex and the City is girl time, and it's about the women. And so I found there is something very endearing and hopeful about the fact that you have what is essentially mom and 3 aunties and Lily. And so in a way it made sense that Lily, even though she's small and she doesn't speak or interact with them yet, that she would be the one that was present through everything, and Brady wasn't. One other thing that I think we should mention before we sort of continue to walk through Lily's silence is I think we also can't overlook the stereotype of the Asian as model minority and this stereotype of Asian people as quiet, respectful, good. And then as an adopted child, Lily, that is like perfectly upholding that stereotype of the good, quiet Asian child as well. And so while I am going to guess that the director and the filmmakers, it doesn't matter what ethnicity the child would have been, they would have wanted them to have been silent because the movie's not about the kid, the movie's about the four women. The fact that you have, it happens to be an Asian child, I think continues to uphold and promote a very negative stereotype. So that was something else that I noticed and found problematic.
Well, and these women who are supposedly so liberal and, with it for all of those things, pretty shortly after we see Miranda apartment hunting in Chinatown, and she what does she say, like, we have to follow the white guy with the baby, that's where we need to be.
Yeah, she's trying to find an address and she can't find it. She's not really sure where she is. And you're exactly right, Haley, I wrote that down too. A white man walks by with a baby and she says, follow that white guy, that's where we need to be. So
these women aren't necessarily all the they're not as woke as they would appear to be.
No, and actually the one other thing along those lines I wanted to point out as well is shortly before that they travel to Mexico. The four women do without the kids. They are in Mexico. And while they are in Mexico, now Haley's making a face and shaking her head. You know where I'm going with this now. It is a running gag while they're in Mexico that Charlotte is only eating packaged chocolate pudding and nothing else. They are staying at this luxury resort and they're all enjoying the food and the drink at the luxury resort, except for Charlotte, who will only eat pudding. And the reason she will only eat pudding is because it's Mexico. Yeah. And so for purposes of Lily, this is her adoptive mother who very clearly devalues a culture other than her own, verbally, this being Mexico specifically. One of her ostensible aunties who, while in Chinatown, says, well, the white people, that's where we want to be. And this is who she's surrounded with. Right?
No wonder she has to be quiet.
No wonder she has to be quiet.
She gets a payback for it because she gets raging diarrhea, as she should.
Yeah, that was karmic diarrhea. That was karmic diarrhea.
Yeah.
Time passes, and suddenly, Charlotte has an announcement. Charlotte's pregnant.
Okay, Auntie Carrie is reading Lily a fairy tale.
Cinderella.
And because she's been literally jilted, she wants to make sure Lily knows, like, this isn't real life. And she's babysitting Lily while Charlotte's at the doctor. So Charlotte comes back and she says to Carrie, I'm pregnant. Carrie says, how? Charlotte says, you know how people always say that when you stop trying, it can happen? And my doctor says that she knows other couples who've adopted and then they get pregnant. And Carrie says, sweetie. And Charlotte says, Carrie, I'm pregnant. And she's like so tearful and, joyous. And then Carrie's voiceover. I guess in certain houses, fairy tales do come true.
That's the fairy tale.
This is the fairy tale. not her getting to be a parent the first time, but the real time, in quotation marks, the real fairy tale is a biological child. Because that was always a first choice, and we all know it. And if you think back to the series with when she was married to Trey, they were doing IVF and whatever. She did all the things in order to get a baby. And now the fairy tale has happened. So this is what the culture soaks in, and the underlying message is that adoption is never a first choice. This is a last resort choice. That is what we are. We're the last resort. And the fairy tale is the right and first choice. And that's infuriating.
Well, and in a scene very shortly thereafter, because Charlotte is a runner. She likes to run. We've seen her running in other parts of the film. And she stops running. And they question her, like, Charlotte, like, why have you stopped running? Like, you love running. Why have you stopped running? And she discloses it's because she's scared. Like, she's scared, essentially, that something will happen to the baby if she runs. And she says, I'm not running, I'm afraid, because I have everything I've ever wanted. Like, now that she's pregnant, to your point, Haley, now that she is pregnant, now she has everything she ever wanted. And not before that.
This just feels so quiet part out loud. Kristal?
I mean, obviously I totally get where you're coming from, but I don't want to fault a person for like the desire of wanting to be a biological parent, right? Like, I can't imagine what it would be like to not be able to conceive, and the thought of like reproductive privilege came up.
I don't think anyone should ever feel ashamed, sorry at all for wanting biological children. Not at all. I think that's I think that's a very natural want. To me that's not the issue. The issue is the people who, for whatever reason, are unable to biologically conceive, and rather than doing the work to work through what that means to them and how they feel about it, they quote unquote just adopt.
Yeah.
That if I adopt a child, that is going to fulfill in me whatever it is I wanted from having the biological child. Yeah. And that is delusional. Like, full stop. Delusional.
100% agree.
So like that for me is like the poking at it. Not at all. That Charlotte wants to birth a child. Of course she does. Like, and she should be thrilled that she's pregnant. And she is thrilled she's pregnant. What we see, however, though, is, she gets pregnant, and there's a scene on New Year's Eve where we do like a little flash to all of the women. What are they doing on New Year's Eve? And Charlotte and Harry are sitting on the couch, and like he's like patting her stomach, because it's out there now. And they're sort of smiling this beautiful New Year's Eve. And they're on one side of the frame, and Lily's on the other side of the frame by herself, smiling. And that is literally the last time. That is literally the last time you will see Lily on screen until the closing shot. For a little girl that was in every single scene in the first half of the movie, the moment Charlotte gets pregnant with her own, Lily is gone from the story. Poof. Disappeared. Job done. Move along.
Totally. Again, why do you think the writers and directors of the film did this? Was it intentional? Was it not? Is it subconscious?
I have a thought. Haley, do you have a thought?
You go.
I think it was another one of those quiet part out loud things. I don't think they realized what they did.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I don't think they realized what they did. I think that the directors and everyone involved with this movie believes that the daughter that Charlotte births, who she names Rose, is the real child, quote unquote, air quotes, real child. Charlotte now has her real child, and therefore we don't have a need for Lily to move the story anymore.
Right. And this kind of goes back to our previous conversations in previous episodes where the adoptee is literally used as a tool to move the story along rather than be represented as an actual human being.
Well, I'm thinking of real adoptees that I know when they're the first one to join the family and then there's biological siblings added. And often they are treated differently. And so to your point, Sullivan, about hopeful parents dealing with infertility grief or not, I mean, please do. It impacts everyone if you don't deal with it.
I think we should also take a minute to talk about this question of, do you think the directors knew? And I think the other thing that the directors didn't want to talk about in this, because it doesn't make for a very nice sitcom or a very nice movie, is what was actually happening with Chinese adoption at this time. Because the storyline of an adoption from China, again, works because I think at the time, and even still today, whether or not people were intimately familiar, there was this sense of, oh yeah, like you can adopt kids from China. And, since 1992, so this is 1992 to present anyway, more than 160,000 children were sent out of China overseas to be adoption. Nearly all foreign adoptions from China involved children with disabilities, and they have largely been girls because of the cultural preference for boys. At the time that this film came out, in the 2010s, there were about 140 million orphans in the world. And again, that's something that people were sort of attuned to, like, oh, there's all these orphans, right? There's all these orphans, and we need to adopt and help all these orphans. But the truth of the matter is, of that 140 million, only about 10% were true orphans, meaning they had neither a mother nor a father. 90% did, in fact, have a living parent. And in fact, even of those 10% that had neither a mother nor a father, the majority had extended family that could care for them as well. And in addition, that 140 million does not include the children that were placed in orphanages as a means of temporary care that their parents intended to return from them at one point in time. And so there was this sense, not only when Sex and the City came out, but before, and even still very much today. I mean, how many times do you hear people say, well, I feel I want to adopt because there's all these children in the world that need families. And it is not true. It's a fiction.
Well, and in fact, those families that line up to hopefully save these orphans who mostly, as you said, have a living parent or extended family that could care for them, they actually propel forward the industry of it all, and it promotes child trafficking. So I know we're going to have links in the show notes to some articles that speak to this, specifically happening in China. It's happened in many countries worldwide that the U.S. specifically has adopted internationally from, but of course these sending countries send to all over the world, where government officials steal babies from parents who are happily parenting their babies. They steal babies to sell to foreigners, and that's a thing. That's a thing today. That was a thing then. We already had investigations going on then. if we did any research, we would know these things and hopefully not participate in the child trafficking system. I've interviewed so many adoptees, and I want to tell you, like, the number of people who have shared their story and they say, what was in my documentation was I was left on the steps of a police station, or I was left on the steps of a hospital, or I was left like somewhere, right? Like discovered somewhere. And I always wonder, like, well, that's what's in your paperwork. I wonder what the true story is. Because surely the true story of, oh, a government official went to my biological parents' house. They saw I was baby number 2. And so they said, you owe us this much money, or we're taking your baby. Oh, you don't have it? Great. We're going to sell this baby to America. Like, that's not written down anywhere. So especially, I feel so much for transnational adoptees who really, truly, like, might not get their story unless they, by some miracle, get a reunion with and be able to talk to their original parents and find out what happened. Like, this is devastating. And I literally looked up when I was like, oh, I wonder if I can figure this out. Like, did seeing this movie make folks want to adopt from China more? Like, like, did seeing Charlotte adopt from China make them want to participate in the system? Did it raise the application rates that they got? I don't know. I could not find proof of that. I wanted to, but I couldn't.
Made me think also about the documentary that I believe came out last year about, or this past year, an update on our family and the YouTube family who adopted a little boy from China and essentially rehomed him. We need to do an episode on that one.
Yeah, for sure. I think, Haley, I know you and I at least had conversations before about, I think a lot of adoptive parents may be listening, adoptive parents of Chinese children, and saying, oh, well, we didn't know, which honestly I have mixed feelings about that. I didn't know. But for purposes of this moment, if I assume that to be the case, I think there is an ask for people, even who say that they didn't know, which is to educate yourself today and use your position to educate others. I think for me, one thing I get really frustrated about is a lot of times I hear adoptive parents say, oh, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about that. Nobody told me. And then I want to know, well, okay, well, what are you doing about it now if you know better? And don't be that adoptive parent who's like, well, I didn't know, ... What are you doing to help adoptees find their birth families, to change legislation, to reparations for adoptees, for a whole litany of things. I think there's a lot of opportunity for activism out there, and it is left to adoptees, which on the one hand, we ought to be at the forefront and we ought to be centered in activism, but on the other hand, we are not the ones with the power. We didn't ask for this. And so, we need true allies, and the natural ally should be the adoptive family, particularly the ones that said they didn't know any better. If you know better now, do better.
So there is another adoptive parent represented by this movie who is also Charlotte York, but it's Kristen Davis, and she is an adoptive mother. She adopted 2 children. And we're going to link to this article. There's an article in People. And I'm going to quote a couple things from it. Off screen, Davis is perfectly happy being single and raising her 2 kids on her own. So Kristen adopted as a single person. She adopted a daughter named Gemma Rose, who her biological daughter, we're going to get to Rose's arrival, in the movie is named Rose. And Kristen says she didn't remember when she named Gemma Rose that her daughter from the movie was named Rose. Okay.
It's like, that's some Twilight Zone shit, but okay. Some Black Mirror stuff. That's like...
Black Mirror stuff, yes. So Gemma Rose, when she reaches around age 5, she asks her mom, she says, I want a black little brother.
Well, because Gemma's black. You love that part.
Gemma's black.
Gemma's black.
Gemma's black.
Yeah.
And this, quoting from the article again, Davis reached out to the same adoption agency to start the process over again. And this is a quote from her, from the article. I just told them that our hearts were open and our home was open. And if a baby needs us, we're here, Davis said. And so then one day, there he was. And I tell you, my daughter didn't bat an eye. She was like, there he is. She's just the best big sister. And the article goes on to explain that Davis learned to style black hair. And she's very conscious about black representation in their home. And I wasn't going to say this, so I didn't write it down, but I am going to now, I believe. I think I'm going to. Davis, this is a quote, Davis noted that Serena Williams is a household fixture of theirs as well, adding that the tennis star's New York Times Magazine cover was front and center in their home for months. I work really hard at the representation part in terms of beauty magazines, she said.
Just for the people in the back, Haley, can you just break down like why that quote? Like why? And for people that are listening and not watching, I'm just sitting here silently shaking my head with my eyes closed. But
this idea that what white adoptive mothers need to do in order to raise black children is to know how to do their hair and to make sure they leave out a magazine on their table for months that has a black star on the cover. The idea that those two things would add up to anything in terms of what a black child would need is so ludicrous. And it's so superficial. And yes, it's a People article, and I'm sure Davis goes beyond those things. But as someone just reading an article about this, it makes it sound like, oh, as long as you know how to do their hair and you got a magazine out on the table and hopefully some black art on the wall. And Kristal, you know, you were saying before, like, I'm looking for every scene that Lily is in. Like, what do we have that is cultural, that we know she's getting to connect with her culture? Like, this is the level of quote unquote cultural competency that we expect of white adoptive parents. And it is not even the bare minimum. That's a nothing.
So first of all, I feel compelled to just point out that in 1972, the National Association of Black Social Workers issued a position statement against white adoptive parents adopting black children in any case. And we'll link to it in the show notes, but they cite a litany of reasons that boil down to, healthy identity formation. I'm simplifying with that one statement, but they list them all in there. And that was 1972, and they have continued to stand by that position statement, right? So this is for over 50 years. And whenever I hear of a white adoptive parent adopting black children, I want to ask them, talk to me about how you reconciled and how you thought about that position statement. Like, I want to understand. And maybe it's a case where they say, I don't know, I read it and I don't think it applies to me. Or I read it and I don't buy what those experts say. Okay. Or maybe it's a case where they say, well, I don't even know what you're talking about, which is also an issue in and of itself. Like, why don't you know? Like, why don't you know that? And it is also worth pointing out, because I understand people will say, well, it was 1972, that was 1972. And, for a whole swath of people, that was before the internet. Like, I was born in 1977. I get it, like pre-internet. But I have a really hard time with that argument also, because I agree it is much easier to find the answers to things today with a couple of clicks than it was before the internet. Absolutely. But also before the internet, competent adults took out mortgages for hundreds of thousands of dollars. They bought houses. They bought cars. People got sick and sought competent medical treatment and second opinions. They took vacations around the world. People did all of these things without the internet and before the internet. So the fact that you are taking a human from one family and culture and bring them into their own, and you say, well, I don't know, there was no internet, nobody told me, is bullshit. Like, I call bullshit on that. So that's number one. Like, I am curious. I would love to ask Kristin Davis. I would love to understand how she reconciled the National Association of Black Social Workers 1972 statement with her decision to adopt 2 Black children. That's number one. Number two, this idea that her daughter says, I want a Black little brother, a little sibling, a little sister, a little sibling, what have you. To me, it's played to sound really cute. And people are like, oh my gosh, it's so cute. But what I hear is her child saying, I want someone in my home that looks like me.
Yeah.
I want a mirror in my home. That is it's not cute. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And then number three, this idea of a magazine. Look, Serena Williams is someone for every man, woman, and child of any race or ethnicity to look up to. We can all agree she's a national treasure. And the idea that Serena Williams is your representation, a celebrity. Now, granted, Kristin Davis is also a celebrity and has a lot of access, but I think about for myself, between the time I was born and the time I turned 18, I had only ever met one Black adult in real life. And yeah, I saw celebrities on TV. I needed them like in my proximity, like not on TV. And so Kristin Davis didn't tell people, and who knows, maybe people edited it out. They had the edit. So maybe what's on the cutting room floor is all of Kristin's Black friends and her children's Black friends and the Black teachers and the Black physicians and Serena. We won't know. But I think at best, that article does a disservice to your point, Haley, telling the world what is required to raise Black children as a white adopted parent.
I'm curious as to what you thought about, because I have 2 more quotes here that, as somebody who was not raised with any connection to my culture, I was actually feeling very encouraged by what Kristin Davis was saying. And so I'm curious to hear what you two have to say about this, because I get it. I think if the article did just say, oh, you need to learn how to do Black hair, yeah, that's ridiculous. That's not enough, clearly. But she says, I am white. I have lived in white privilege. I thought I knew before adopting my daughter that I was in white privilege, that I understood what that meant. But until you actually have a child, which is like your heart being outside of you, and that heart happens to be in a brown body, and you have people who are actively working against your child, it's hard. She also then says, because my children are African American, I feel like it's my duty and my job to do as much research, as much work, build as many bridges as possible because you are their community. I work at that every day trying to figure out how I can make sure they have access to the Black community, that they're part of it, that they're not separated from it.
But like, she did separate them from the Black community. So that's like that's like faux allyship where like you're part of the problem and you're gonna solve it after.
I hear that, and I will admit, as I was reading this article, I was like, wow, she's saying all of the things that I ever wanted to hear about.
I feel that, yeah.
You know, I felt that, and I was like, man, if I had a adoptive mother that cared that much and talked like that about having white privilege and wanting me to have access and connection, I mean, what would that have done for me as an adoptee? But it also felt a little bit performative.
Yeah, Kristal, what you just said like resonates with me so deeply. I got none of the things that Kristin Davis even says. I got none of it. And, you know, like you, because you and I have talked about this, I mean, we both experienced a lot of discrimination and racism under our roofs growing up. And I think for me, where I am, is I believe if the people that truly get it, the true allies, the people that truly understand white privilege, then they don't exercise it in this case. You know, to say, oh, I understand I have white privilege, and I'm going to double down on it by separating a family of color, an indigenous family, a Black family, a family who's experiencing poverty, you know, like, that's not allyship. It's explicitly not allyship. And so I believe Kristin Davis when she says, I thought I understood privilege before. You know, I believe her when she says that, because that's part of privilege, right? Like, part of privilege is we don't necessarily understand that we have it until hopefully we're always learning and growing. And that's a constant thing forever. Also, by the way, like, I don't think it's ever like, okay, I used to have privilege, I don't anymore. Like, no, of course, you always have the privilege. You always have forever. It's just a case of what you do with it. And so for me, it's the like, okay, so I don't think if you understand privilege, what you do with it is lean into it. In this way, I think. And I'm what I'm about to say. I have no idea if Kristin Davis is doing this or not. But like, I go back to what I said before about like, okay, well, let's take white adoptive parents generally. White adoptive parents generally who say, "Oh, I didn't know this at the time I adopted. I didn't realize it, but now I understand." Then I would ask, okay, so what are you doing about it? You know, what are you doing on things like, you know, access? How are you fighting on behalf of adopted people as it relates to allowing us to have access to our medical records? What are you doing for adopted people as it relates to our ability to obtain our original birth certificates? Like, all of these type of things. I ask white adoptive parents, okay, if you didn't know then, but you know now, specifically, what are you doing?
Yeah, and I to your point, I feel like, you know, we can only do as much as we have the awareness around. And I think that maybe I want to offer Kristin Davis a little bit of grace in that I feel like she's doing what she believes like is the very best thing for her child with the information that she has now. And I don't want to discredit it. That's my stance. But I hear you. And I don't disagree with you at all. at all.
I don't want to keep going back and forth. I'll just say she's a very well-resourced woman. And there is a time period between when she adopts her first Black child to when she adopts her second. And I don't know what her adoption agency told her to learn about any of those things. I mean, she's had time. So, shall we talk about the closing scene?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Because Lily comes back. We haven't seen Lily in about 90 minutes, but Lily is back with us in the closing scene. And I noticed not only was Lily back, but I thought it was interesting that Lily was back, and she was back in a scene that involved the extended, family and friends, because Big and Carrie do eventually get married, and they have a reception dinner, with small reception dinner. I mean, there's maybe 20 people there or so. But I noticed that, again, this wasn't the intimate 4 women plus Lily. This was the extended family. And now Lily has, in my mind, made her way from the central circle to the outer circle of the family in that closing scene. One thing that I did notice, and we haven't talked about this thematically, but, there's a Cinderella theme through this movie, a Cinderella motif that I think is, very much meant to look at the fairy tale of marriage, and we see that threaded through. I would also argue there is a second fairy tale thread, though, and that is of Charlotte getting her baby at the end of the day. Because when the movie closes, we have Carrie and Big are married. We have Miranda back with Steve. They had an issue. They broke up. They are back together now. So we have that happy ending for Miranda. Samantha breaks up with Smith and comes back to New York. So she's single again, which she desires to be, and she's back in New York where she desires to be. So Samantha gets her happy ending, her fairy tale ending, and the fourth character, of course, is Charlotte. And Charlotte's happy fairy tale ending only comes with her biological child. Haley, do you want to give an award?
I'd love to. I'd love to. After years of infertility and the kind of optimism only Charlotte York could maintain, adoption entered the story not as the ending, but as the expensive detour. Love arrived, Lily arrived, and then wouldn't you know it, so did a biological pregnancy. It was the kind of miracle that makes you wonder, was adoption really the family plan? Or just the universe's way of saying, relax, honey, now you're ready. The "and just like that, I got pregnant" award goes to Sex and the City, the movie, for serving up the fantasy that once you spend tens of thousands of dollars, you finally get what you wanted all along. Adoption Pop is podcaster Haley Radke,
Filmmaker Kristal Parke,
and cultural critic Sullivan Summer. In researching this episode, we got a lot. Stay with me here. We relied on the New York City Council website, Film and Television Permits, Tabitha Britt, all about Kristen Davis's 2 children, Gemma Rose and Wilson, for People, Josh Friedman, Sex is a Big Hit Among Women, for the LA Times, Sharon Lafreniere, Chinese officials seized and sold babies, parents say, for the New York Times, Raman Sidota, criticism of Sex and the City is mostly sexist, for Newsweek, Alexander Stevenson and Zishu Wang, China stops foreign adoptions, ending a complicated chapter, for the New York Times, and Kimberly McKee's Adoption Fantasies, the fetishization of Asian adoptees from girlhood to womanhood.
If you like what we do, drop us a rating in your podcast app, find and follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and let us know what you want us to cover in future episodes.
We're not Hollywood journalists, but we play them on this podcast. And next week, we crash their biggest night, the Golden Globes, with a look at one of 2025's biggest winners on Adoption Pop.
It's gonna be brutal.